Weiyin was one of China's most important, yet long neglected, and even persecuted 20th century painters. He lost Pearl in the core of art history, according to art historian Li Shu.
What's amazing to me is how significant this chair is, that it represents his friend who isn't included in the painting. And it's got so much personality, and the paint is so almost explosive or joyful. Every stroke is done quickly, gesturally, not very descriptively, and you get this gorgeous abstraction once you lose track of the structure of the chair, but it's still there. Intense colors and rather unusual colors too, black, yellow, red. And it feels, just as you were saying, it seems like a place that's seen a lot of thought and work and care. Did your father talk about Van Gogh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that he and Van Gogh would be able to invest a chair with a lot of personality, a lot of life. I just love that chair. I also, from a descriptive point of view, they're probably 15 marks in here, along here, this side of the fruit, top of there, a couple of teeny accents there. And here comes the sun in through the window, lighting up that whole place. He's so understated with description of light. Yeah, shades of Philip Custer. Middle period Philip Custer.
Ren Weiyin's story is the kind movies are made of. In the 1940s, he was already a highly regarded full-time painter and had published books and articles on drawing and painting technique. Ren was also China's top travel writer, sponsored by a bank and travel agency. But soon after Shanghai's liberation in 1949, he lost this job due to his personal history. He was transferred to become a department store salesman, but hated it and a few days later quit and established his own painting studio. It was soon one of the most prominent painting studios in all of China. During the day, the studio had many students. Those who could not afford the studio's fees but showed exceptional talent, Ren granted free tuition. At night, over endless pots of tea, the studio became a symposium of Shanghai's intellectuals. Artists, writers, poets, professors all came to discuss philosophy, art, etc., and avoiding politics. Nonetheless, the studio soon came under the scrutiny of the authorities, and in 1961 it was forcibly shut down. Ren and his family, wife, 2 daughters, 1 son, were given 4 days to sell their possessions and relocate to Yinma Farm, a notorious re-education through labor camp in Gansu province, in which many thousands died in the 1960s. After suffering 9 months of debilitating treatment, the family escaped, eventually returning to Shanghai and staying in the cheapest hotels, as their former home was no more. When the local authorities caught up with them, the family was told to go back to the forced labor camp. At this, Ren Jiang, the matriarch, said, "If that is your decision, then we shall just die in front of you now and save you the cost of the trip." The authorities were taken aback. "How can you dare to say such things?" "Because if you send us back to the camp, we will all die anyway. So what's the difference?" A few days later came the authorities' decision. The Ren family could stay in Shanghai, provided they kept their mouths shut. They were moved into a 9-square-meter concrete room with no bath or kitchen, no heat, 1 light bulb hanging from a wire, and 1 small window. That was their home for the next 20 years. Forbidden to reopen a studio, or even to give private painting lessons, Ren Weiyin was reduced to supporting his family by repairing shoes for 17 years. Despite this, Ren's creative spirit refused to be crushed, and he continued to paint whenever he could sneak away from the shoe repair stall. His courage and dedication resulted in the creation of hundreds of paintings, many of them depicting a Shanghai which no longer exists. As art critic Jia Fangzhou noted, though Ren Weiyin had a very tough experience and much misfortune, he strove for the beauty of life in his painting. The Shanghai I see in the painting of Mr. Ren is the real Shanghai.
It's such an uncorny way of showing you that it's been raining. Instead of showing a puddle with little concentric circles, he's just got the umbrella hanging on the edge of the table. He's so sure of his perspective that just a little line like that one against that one pulls you back into space. He never clobbers you over the head with too much convergence. It's just by subtle suggestion. I see it as a good example of the sort of purposefully informal way he cropped his compositions. There's a feeling of contemporary photography about them, in that although you have this complete object, everything else in the whole composition is comprised of pieces. So you get some of that, one leg of the chair, part of the jug, part of the pot, everything in little informal pieces and suggestions instead of backing off and showing you everything of everything. So, as the viewer, you supply the rest of the information. You fill in the blanks and become more of a participant. So it seems to be a wonderful way of getting the viewer more involved in the work.
Right.
That it's not clearly spelled out to you, every bit of it. And to keep a kind of balance between the foreground and background of the support material versus the main objects, he uses these beautifully droll lines in an object like that, whereas in the background he uses the broader strokes, the more liquid, so it's softer, builds up to the intensity of this color. This is quiet color-wise, but then it has a lot of personality in a linear way.
Ren Weiyin developed his unique painting style, a blending of Western influences, especially Impressionism, and traditional Chinese methods, by diluting his oil paints with more oil and sometimes turpentine in order to allow freer movement of the paint, which allowed him to incorporate the techniques of Chinese calligraphy. Ren said his main subject was vivid human life. He rejected the then predominant influence of socialist realism. Ironically, his works reveal the life of 1960s and 70s Shanghai with a far more realistic and socialist perspective than those created under the banner of socialist realism. Ren Weiyin's paintings are primarily about revealing the quiet poetry of the commonplace. Whether portraits, flowers, plates of fish, a street, marketplace, park, or factory assembly line, Ren Weiyin eschewed the obviously grand, majestic, and mythically heroic, instead favoring much more humble, truly proletarian subjects, rendering them as they were with all their dignity and inner life, without false grandeur or pretension. Ren Weiyin's paintings also combined and possessed the tension of a Buddhist-like serenity with a probing, artistic sensibility, a gentle and modest feeling, as well as a clear and persistent experimental spirit, as art historian Lan said.
This one is so Chinese versus Western. It seems like every once in a while they just clear the Western stuff out, and just for the sheer joy of using the calligraphic mark. And this one's so empty. The blue imprimatura, or the underpainting, is hardly disturbed at all. Just building to these couple of highlights here. Yeah, I really like this painting. The variety of brush marks, this really fast dry brush dragged across there, these soft smudges. And just in an area like that, without the calligraphy, he uses the brush in about 10 different ways. And I'm sure he wasn't pausing to think about it. He was just dashing that brush through there.
Right.
Incredible. And you know what I was saying earlier about the vase painting, sort of casual composition. Here, the bridge, you just see the tiniest portion of it, just enough to get the feeling of that lift up into space and people walking over. Instead of having it be the center of attention, you essentially begin your walk and the painting ends up way over here. You finish it in your own mind from your own memory. Yeah, I really love this one too. And he's not afraid to put in modern stuff. Phone lines, phone poles, whatever. Outboard motor. And then just these little smears. He doesn't go overboard on reflection. It's mostly lines that go this way to describe the current of the water.
Right.
But just every once in a while he does a little downward smudge so that this stuff is reflected down there. I'm interested in this painting because of the technician's game, the painter's game that he's playing with two different planes, one going back into space, induced by the perspective, convergence, especially over to this side. It makes you feel like you're going deep into space. And then this insistent mark making across, the picture plane, these discrete marks that are displayed all the way across. So you've got this insistence on this verticality and a softer, quieter insistence on the moving back into space, and this really gentle tension in between those two, which he does just brilliantly. Never too much of either. The perspective is kind of like the spice, the pull back into space, and then the pattern is the main flavor of this painting. And I think down here, it looks like once the major brush marks were put onto the underpainting, that he took a paper towel and just patted it a couple of times, and you get this really eccentric kind of zigzag patterning in there. And then, of course, this liquid continued to move even after he had done that. So you get this gentle dripping that goes across there. So you can really sense a kind of process going on. At 3 o'clock he did this, at 4 o'clock he did this, then he waited, and then at 5 o'clock, it was probably faster than that, but doesn't seem to be all of one piece. It seems like it's bits and pieces unfolding over time, which is so delightful. And it does seem like his acknowledgement of time is also something I consider to be beautifully original. That it's been said quite a few times that he recorded a Shanghai that doesn't exist anymore, but at the same time he recorded certain aspects of light and season and place that seem to be always with us. So some things are fading away, other things are always present, they kind of refresh each other. I really enjoy that about his work.
During the Culture Revolution, Ren said he was often denounced in public. Every year they shouted slogans against me. In a way, it gave me a strange satisfaction. That people remembered to beat me down meant my existence still had value. Despite all that, I began to feel that shoe repair is a safe and comforting job. I came upon the idea that any altruistic work would finally prove to benefit oneself if one had an honest attitude. I felt the bright sunlight, lush plants, and could see the loveliness of everything. These are things I could not feel before my bad fate, and I made some paintings that could not have been created before or after those days. Indeed, as art historian Pan Yao Chang put it, in his painting, we see no complaining, sadness, or resentment, but find peaceful and tranquil moods and the love of surroundings. This is the understanding and wisdom of life.
This is the one that reminds me the most of a ceramic horse. The particular kind of runniness here, and the way when he defined this window with the dark green, the way the paint fans out or leaches out into the yellow area beyond it, just exactly the way glazes do on the curved body of a ceramic horse. And I guess in some ways this is part of that idea of not showing everything to you. Instead of looking down the little lane, it just shows you the very first part of it, and you're left to imagine where it goes, and then you can see buildings in the distance, so you know it continues. In fact, this rooftop is probably on the same street. So you imagine yourself going out of the sun into the shade down this little lane, and there's kind of a heightened sense of intimacy because you can't see. You get part of it, the rest of it is yours to imagine. I enjoyed this painting for the way, or the ways that Ren defined space, the three-dimensional perceived space. It gives you very high contrast and a lot of heavy line through this area here.
Right.
Again, calligraphic in a way. And this space is angling back, and it's interrupted by this building. So you get about 50 feet back into the space, and then it stops. But it suggests an angle way into the distance. Then you get this curved form with the sun shining on it. Around here, you have this burst of abstract wildness. All different kinds of variety of brush mark, how hard he pushed on the brush, changes of color running all over the palette, just really a fantasy in a way. You kind of forget that it's actually bushes. And so you've gone down that alley, you sort of come back around here, you've hit all of this firm brushwork, and then you emerge into this silver space that goes hundreds of yards into the distance and just dissolves into the sky. And in the most economical way, he shows you the boat in shadow, the boat in sun, the reflection in sun, the reflection in shadow, slightly dissolved in the paint underneath. Just one or two little marks here describes the effect of the sun on that stone bridge. And then the wet paint into further wet paint just causes this to be so fluid and watery. And what makes it even more watery is the fact that there are some of these tougher strokes, not quite this tough, but still very firm, so that in comparison, the atmosphere here is gauzy, hazy, hardly even there, and this is tough and firm. And the green beyond the bridge, just this soft little green, essentially shows you everything else in the whole world. You know, you've gone down this street, you've come around there, you've finally gotten into this open space, and just that one little smear takes you all the way to the horizon. You can't see it, but it suggests this vast, vast space out there. So I just love the journey of moving through, walking through this space, and seeing tight space and open space and defined space and atmospheric space. So many different bright, intellectual gestures in that painting. I would guess that a lot of, shall we say, casual Western observers would look at this and think of it as being a late French Impressionist work. The subject matter, the brushwork, all sort of suggests that, but then there's this branch that starts in the bottom left-hand corner and essentially covers up the whole painting, which the marking, the heavy, fat line that dwindles, there would be no Western painter that could do that, or would even dream of doing that. You know, the use of the brush held vertically, instead of like this, held above the canvas and pushed hard at the beginning. You get that beautiful, fat, organic mark. Then it tapers and pauses. And just following this one set of lines from here all the way up to here is like watching a river widen or narrow as you go. So it's almost like everything back there is not disrespected, but at the service of this branch that goes flying across the whole picture plane. It's hilarious. I get the feeling that Ren occasionally liked to be 2 or 3 stories up, out of the hubbub down at street level. There's nobody to be seen up here, and yet there probably are hundreds of people in this area, but the particular cropping just shows you all these varied roofs. The palette in here, doesn't this remind you of that crab painting? Those oranges and browns, and then bam, he throws in that blue, which balances out all that warm color, but also flies way back into space. So he doesn't create distance so much here with perspective, but with the cooler color which recedes. That's a very icy blue. Just that one little dab, and he adds about 500 yards of depth to the painting. I see this painting as being Ren at his most calligraphic, and in so being, also at his most Van Gogh-like. Small, quirky, broken strokes that almost verge into the written language. Come so close in areas like through here, And up through here, it's almost as if he's writing a letter to you, but at the same time he's speaking to you that way. It's obviously about a tree or a flower. I think a point to be made is that his work has a post-impressionistic quality to it, which was a very forward-thinking movement. Impressionism being a very early modernist way of looking at the world. Post-impressionism being a big step towards cubism and thus abstraction. So I guess I have a little bit of a bone to pick with the term impressionist applied to Ren's work, only insofar as that term is usually used in a kind of a soft, warm, friendly, acceptable way. An art that will not offend anybody, and I think that his work is tougher than that. And as I was looking at that and thinking about the sort of dance he was doing between calligraphy and the written language and the descriptive language of his painting, I was thinking of scat singing and jazz as being something that uses broken little bits of words in a percussive manner that is more purely pictorial, I guess you could say, or maybe purely abstractly sonic. So this is like visual scat singing. It's almost language, and yet it's got tempo, rhythm, accent, all that glorious kind of punctuation marks, but it doesn't actually have the direct verbal language itself, and it just seems so brilliant to be able to sustain that kind of edgy two language at once throughout a whole painting. Just so smart.
In 1978, Ren Weiyin was considered rehabilitated, and the Shanghai History and Culture Institute arranged the first post-Culture Revolution exhibition of his work. More exhibitions soon followed in other Chinese cities, Taiwan, and Japan. In 2010, the Shanghai Art Museum hosted the largest retrospective exhibition to date, with 250 works displayed. The enthusiastic response from critics, journalists, and the general public led to the opening of the Ren Weiyin Art Gallery in Shanghai's Fang district, in order to further share the beauty of these works.